Hello, it's Amy. I'm back again with the Journal of Emily Shore, back again beside my Christmas tree, and we are beginning the final chapter of Emily Shore's journal. So we are beginning with the entry for January the 3rd, 1839, which was a Thursday. With much toil and labor, we at last finished unpacking and putting away everything that we have brought with us, and thus we are in a state of greater comfort. But now comes a novelty. We are obliged, from the known thievish character of Portuguese servants, to lock up everything, a thing we never did in England. I have shortened this business by always locking my room when I leave it. It is most unpleasant to live in this continual distrust, and to be assured that after all we shall certainly be cheated more or less. January 4th, Friday. We spent the last half hour of delay in a trip to the Esplanade. 2 or 3 gloomy little streets brought us to the side of Ribeira. Here we paused in extreme admiration. The sea on one side and the mighty mountain on the other, with its deep ravines, its nearer and more distant summits, varied more beautifully with light and shade from the rays of the sun sinking to its rest than any scenery I have hitherto beheld. Full half of the mount was bathed in a rich crimson glow, such a crimson glow as is never seen in England, while the other half was in dark shadow, except where the loftier ridges were tipped with the sunbeams, which, as the sun dropped rapidly, shifted from summit to summit and glided up the hillside, almost with the play of the aurora borealis. And here we're just passing by what I assume to be a facsimile reproduction of a page of the journal in Emily's own writing. But that does not correspond to what I'm reading now here. This would be, I think, from a later section of the journal. At the same time, the Loo Rock rose clear and black against the blazing west, and the 2 desertas were distinctly painted on the opposite sky. We did not stand looking, but crossed the Ribeira and entered the gate of the Esplanade, from whence we beheld the same delightful scene. This noble walk was but one defect, the want of turf, so that, as it is not even hard and levelled, the feet move with such discomfort over small loose stones. The place will soon be a complete geranium garden. When the trees are grown so as to afford a thick shade, which will be the case in a year or 2, I should think that its equal would not be found in any place in the world. A walk of such magnificent dimensions close to the sea, almost in the midst of so large a city and surrounded by the splendid mountains of Madeira, their surface, as well as the face of the sky, ever varying with the play of sunlight and clouds of diverse colors. What other public promenade in the universe can boast of such manifold attractions? The low stone passage or parapet, scarce 4 feet high, which surrounds it, rises very little above the stony beach outside, and is here and there cut into seats on which we rested ourselves. Nobody was there except a few Portuguese and English fops, smoking in grounds or swaggering up and down in solitude with an odious cigar. Mamma and I did not stay long, for we had not gazed many minutes on the crimson mountain, before it all faded into a soft and quiet grey. It changed beneath our look, and we could see the daylight hurrying from the earth. January 5th, Saturday. Mrs. P. made her first call today. She is a sweetly pretty little creature, fair and delicate, has clear bright eyes arched with the prettiest little penciled eyebrows, a most pretty little straight nose, and a little affected lisp to set off all her other little prettiness. January 6th, Sunday. In the afternoon, being stronger than usual, I took a walk with Mamma and Elle, longer than any since I have been in Madeira, and almost a country walk. We first went to the Esplanade, or, according to its more correct though ridiculous name, the Praça Academia. We did not stay here long, as I was seized with a sudden fancy of exploring the neighbourhood of the Ribeira close by, up which none of us have yet walked. Thither accordingly we bent our steps. Every moment, as we followed the course of the stream, we seemed to approach nearer the mountains, and the deep ravine from which it flows, or rather flowed, for there is no water now in the channel except close to the sea. A low stone parapet, cut into the seat here and there, runs along the edge, and on these seats we now and then sat down. As we proceeded, the country rapidly opened before us, and at last we reached a spacious amphitheatre in the shape of a crescent, beautifully enclosed by the stream on the straight side, and the mountains curving round the other. Picturesque houses at the base, and rising one over the other in terraces with gardens and vine trellises, supported on rows of stone pillars. Houses and vine trellises bordered the other side of the Ribiera, and before us it entered the deep ravine. This open space struck us as peculiarly beautiful. Part of it even covered with turf, which reminded us of England. But nothing could be more unlike England than every other surrounding object. The mingled bananas, orange trees, vines, and flowers which half embosomed every house. The rocky terraces, the towering mountain, the stony bed of the torrent, the groups of swarthy Portuguese lounging in the balconies or gathered round a clear fountain gushing from the wall into a stone basin. We sat here for some time, looking back now and then at the pure blue sea, which began to narrow between the houses, between the town and the mountain. It was a long walk for me, and Mamma urged me to turn back. I confess I was very weary, but the scenery was so noble that I was tempted on and could not persuade myself to stop. In a short time we reached the extremity of the open space and turned round the corner of the rock, where there was only a narrow rugged path between the mountain and the Ribiera. Here we were at last truly in the country, and the mouth of that grand ravine which forms the most conspicuous object from Funchal. Opposite to us on the other side rose a nearly precipitous rock covered with prickly pear, the commonest weed in Madeira, and fringed with bananas. A little stream poured down from the brink through the foliage in a fall of 15 or 20 feet, making a loud and pleasant murmur, which sounded most delicious in Mamma's ears, as she is passingly fond of streams. Immediately above us, a little stone-built cottage was perched like a nest on the mountainside, in the midst of foliage, with steps leading up to it and a tiny rivulet dropping from the rock above and sparkling in the setting sunbeams. We descended into the dry bed of the Ribiera, which is filled with stones of all sizes and fragments of rock. On one of these I sat and rested, while Mamma and Elle wandered on a little farther. The banks were covered with weeds, amongst them a profusion of the wild English furnitory. The ravine continued winding far away among the mountains. Through the opening by which we had entered, there was one little peep of the still sea, and a single vessel floated on its surface. The song of the robin came across the Ribiera. The little cascade was murmuring in my ears. All else was still, till a merry party of Portuguese boys, black-eyed, pale-faced, slender lads, came jumping and leaping from stone to stone along the dry channel. The sun was sinking, and we hastened homewards for fear of being benighted. We went by a rather different way, crossing the Ribiera by a bridge a little above the Rua das Porta Novas. Here we met that stately gentleman, Mr. And there's a blank there, Mr. Leading a little son by each hand. He condescendingly took off his hat and half inclined his head with a majestic, "Your most obedient madame," graciously paused to chat a minute, and parted with us without degrading himself by shaking hands. Continuing our way, we went to Mr. Holloway's boarding house, which is in a most lovely situation. The approach is by a paved walk entirely bordered with high hedges of luxuriant roses. The gate stood open, and we could not resist the temptation of walking in a little way. The owner of the boarding house, a Portuguese who speaks English, seeing us retreating when he appeared, followed and very civilly invited us into his garden. We went up to the house door by a flight of steps, quite mantled with creepers and leading to an open stone area before the door, railed round and adjoining to a little elevated garden full of flowers. The house commands a delightful view of the sea, trellises covered with vines, pumpkins, roses, and white jessamine, shrubs of hibiscus covered with crimson blossoms, and complete hedges of heliotrope 6 or 7 feet high, with bananas, orange trees, and sugar canes covering the waste ground beyond, combine to form the usual foreign appearance presented by houses in Funchal. The Portuguese desired a girl, his daughter, I imagine, to gather us a nosegay, which she did with right good will, and we returned home loaded with flowery spoils. And we'll leave it at that for today as we're at the 10-minute mark. But that sounds like a delightful walk, and I don't blame her for wanting to go as far into the country as possible. As kind of a country person myself, even when we find ourselves at home in the city, there is a part of us that always wishes for that country walk and that country scenery. So I very much relate to that.